He is none other than former Denver Bronco and former Michigan Wolverine champion. Had half of his championship stolen by the University of Nebraska, if I don't mind saying. He's Brian Griese. How are you, Brian?
I'm doing great, Rich. How is your mental health after last weekend?
You know what, Brian? I tweeted out during the game, Michigan-Notre Dame game, breaking news that I began drinking. That was around. that was right around the second quarter, right around dinner time, when my wife took the 3 children out of the house. Brian, does that give you an indication?
Well, that's not acceptable, Rich. You have to have a pregame, ritual, tailgate, something like that, just to get you in the right frame of mind for what's going to happen this year with Michigan.
So, what is going to happen this year with Michigan, Brian?
So, if you ask Jim Harbaugh, I think he believes that this team could be a good football team. What we saw Saturday night was beyond bad. I think everybody who's a Michigan fan wanted to see improvement on the offense. You bring in Jim McElwain, Ed Warner, the offensive line coach. You still have Pep Hamilton, who was a coordinator for the Indianapolis Colts. You got a lot of Chiefs in the kitchen there. And it hasn't worked offensively. I still think that this could be a good football team. Defensively, we know what they are with Don Brown. But to not score an offensive touchdown through 58 minutes of the opener it's just not acceptable. So to me, Rich, they have to get better up front, the offensive line, and develop players. They've signed great players, but they haven't developed them well enough on the offensive line to be successful with any kind of consistency.
Well, that's the third rail conversation, Brian, is that Jim Harbaugh is not the right man for the job. Do you think he is?
So far, Rich, it hasn't been good. And I'm not going to say that he's not the right guy for the job going forward, but it has to get a lot better this year. I think that opening game created a sense of urgency for the University of Michigan football team and Jim Harbaugh in particular to turn it around this year. And, there's certainly opportunities with, Michigan State, Ohio State games coming up, Penn State, to make this a successful year. But I just think that the first game and the first taste in the mouth kind of expedited this process.
What do you think of what Braylon Edwards had to say, Brian?
It wasn't totally wrong. I would not have taken it out on the individual players, obviously. But, what Braylon Edwards is saying has a bitter truth to it, which is why I think you see the way Jim Harbaugh reacted to it.
Brian Griese here on the Rich Eisen show. So clearly, Tua was the right choice in Alabama, right? And to me, that's what Nick Saban showed in barking at Maria Taylor and her appropriate question, saying you're trying to get me to say something negative, because her question is what did you learn from the quarterbacks? And we saw what we saw from Tua. How do you think this all plays out for Alabama the rest of the season at the quarterback position, Brian?
Well, I think, what you've seen from Nick this week, he's named Tua the starter,
yep,
and that he'll use Jalen in certain situations, i.e. short yardage goal line where he can run the football. I think that's what you're going to see for the remainder of the season from Alabama, and I think it's the right decision from Nick Saban because Tua Tagovailoa opens up their offense in a myriad of different ways. But, the question is the way that Nick Saban handled that controversy through the offseason, preseason, first game, and then with Maria, who, you're right, asked a completely inbounds question. And it's kind of interesting to see that Nick Saban, who so many young coaches, players look up to, fall down in that moment because he would admit, I think, that he fell down in that moment because so many people look up to him. You don't want coaches to have to act like that. And so hopefully he learns from it, and hopefully those watching understand that you don't need to act like that to be a head coach at any level.
Brian Griese, college football analyst for ESPN, and we'll get to Monday Night Football and the NFL in a second. So do you think that quarterbacks who get passed over or think they have an opportunity to start that should have free reign to transfer whenever they want, however they want in college football, Brian?
Well, Rich, you're asking a guy that when I came to Michigan, I was sixth on the depth chart. Behind guys like Todd Collins and Jay Remersma and Jason Carr and Scott Loeffler, on and on and on. And I have a different take on it. I waited my time. You never know what's going to happen with injuries and other kids that leave. I look back at what happened in my career, and if I had made a quick decision as a young, immature 18, 19-year-old to leave and go to some other school or a MAC school or Division II or III school, what I would have missed out on, and had I not stuck it out. And I think a lot of that comes from, our old friend Bo Schembechler, who said those who stay will be champions. And I still believe that in my heart. And even when, the number one recruit in the country, Scott Dreisbach, came in and he started over me as a younger player. And then they recruited a guy from California. You may have heard of him.
Yes.
So I would love to see the epidemic of quarterback transfers in college kind of subside a little bit, because I think it's gotten out of control.
Brady was never above you on the depth chart, though, was he, Brian?
No, but we competed. He was 2 years younger than me. In my fifth year, he and I were competing for the starting job.
So did he have that competitive fire then that he's so famous for now, Brian?
There's no question. There's no question. Tommy, and I, the guys of us in the locker room, when we first met Tommy, this kid that came from California, and he had longer hair. It wasn't quite down to his shoulders, but it definitely was longer hair. And, we didn't know what we were going to get in Tom Brady, but certainly quickly you could see that there was just a different energy and a different focus and intentionality from Tom that, quite frankly, you knew he was going to be a success once he had the opportunity.
We talked about it the other day with Ty Law, Brian Griese, that it's amazing that a few years later in the National Football League on a snowy night in New England, that Brady and Charles Woodson, of all people, would meet in the backfield for one of the most famous playoff moments of all time. The Raiders call it the Tuck Rule game. The Patriots call it the Snow game. Where do you stand on that subject, Brian? Fumble, not? Where do you stand on this subject?
As I was watching the game, Rich, I'm a little bit torn. Who am I going to root for? Am I going to root for my former teammate Tom or my former teammate Charles?
Right.
And so, I had to make a quick decision before the game started. And given that I was playing for the Broncos at that time, I clearly had to go against the Raiders. And so I was all in on Tom. So it was incomplete time.
Okay. I love that. So you went AFC West right there. And in that regard, Brian, as somebody who stepped right into the shoes that John Elway vacated, you were the first starter after the Duke left after 2 Super Bowl wins. What advice do you give Case Keenum, who's now the Duke's hope to be the next Elway? Because we're just throwing Peyton Manning's experience in Denver out the window because they all knew that he was just going to be there for a short period of time, hoping to catch Super Bowl lightning in a bottle. What advice would you give Case Keenum in the Rocky Mountains, Brian Griese?
I think it's you were in a glass bubble, and you just got to keep the blinders on. And there's going to be some ups and downs as the season goes. They have gotten better, I believe, offensively up front on the offensive line, but there's still going to be some bumps in the road. There's going to be opinions, unlike anything he's ever experienced, good and bad. His relationship with John Elway, I think, is solid. I think John, and I spoke with John during these preseason games that I was announcing on television, and John actually told me that they were very close to getting a trade done for Case Keenum when he was in L.A. with the Rams, and just weren't able to get it done. So John has had an affection for Case and his abilities for quite some time, and I know he was excited to get him from Minnesota. So I think John has a belief in Case, and so that goes a long way to mitigating some of the ups and downs that Case will inevitably go through this year. But I think Case is going to be fine. And honestly, Rich, after doing 4 of their preseason games,
yep.
I think this offense will surprise some people. It was an abomination last year, but they have added 2 outstanding talents at the receiver position at Cortland Sutton and Deshaun Hamilton, and they get back the return of Jake Butt from injury, your favorite Michigan tight end. So I think they're going to be much better offensively this year.
Well, I mean, it's starting tight ends from the Ohio State, right? Hireman, that kid can ball out, Brian, right?
He can play. He's just been hurt, and he hasn't been consistent, and he's dealt with knee injury after knee injury. So
right.
If he can stay healthy, he can certainly be a playmaker.
So a couple more minutes left here with Brian Griese. You're calling the first Monday night game of the season coming up on Monday between the Jets and the Lions. Sam Darnold, youngest Super Bowl era Week 1 starter, period. Nobody's ever been as young as Sam Darnold. How do you think he is going to fare? And with the Jets putting all the eggs in his basket right from the get-go here?
I felt Sam Darnold was, of the 5 guys drafted in the first round at quarterback this year, I felt like he had the best head on his shoulders, and not just from a smart standpoint, but also from a standpoint where he could handle the pressure. And I think that he's got enough pieces around him with Josh McCown, obviously, I think, as a veteran quarterback to help him with kind of the ups and downs. But he's also very confident, and he's won the locker room. This job was not given to him by Todd Bowles. He had to go out there, and he had to perform better than Teddy Bridgewater. And he had to win the confidence of the team. I think he did that. Certainly, as a rookie quarterback, there's going to be ups and downs. But he has a unique skill set and a unique temperament that I think this is the right decision for the Jets and the organization moving forward.
And then the Lions, what have you seen already on tape, film, whatever, for a team that now has a new coach? We're basically talking about every other team in the NFC North right now, because the Bears are who we think they might be, to use a Denny Green phrase, with Khalil Mack now coming there, taking on Aaron Rodgers in the first Sunday night game of the year. Rodgers getting pizzade like that, and the Packers now have him back healthy, and the Vikings get Kirk Cousins. We all think that they're Super Bowl worthy. Who are the Lions, best you can tell?
I don't think anybody knows, Rich, and I think we're not going to find out until we play these first couple of games, because Matt Patricia, first-time head coach, and who spent the past 13 years with the Patriots under Bill Belichick, is really the only guy he's ever had as a mentor. How is he going to be? Is he going to be able to win this team over? Are they buying into what he's selling? One of the things I'm really interested to see, and I want to talk with Matt Patricia later this week, is after 13 years of watching the relationship between Bill Belichick and Tom Brady, is he going to try to establish that same kind of relationship with Matt Stafford in his 10th year? Because we know that Matt Stafford is talented and can shoulder the load. So is that the kind of relationship, is that the structure that Matt Patricia is trying to put into place? I think it'll be fascinating to watch. And certainly nobody has taken the Lions seriously, and I think they have some pieces to compete in that division.
Now, I know you got interviews to conduct and practices to watch, but are you going to sneak up to Ann Arbor this coming weekend? When you're in Detroit?
They're playing, who are they playing? They're playing Western Michigan?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I think I'm going to take a pass on that.
So, is everything going to be all right there, Brian? I'm on behalf of Wolverine Nation, wondering from a guy who's got a ring with Lloyd Carr. Is everything going to be all right there?
Everything's going to be fine. You just take.
Don't patronize me, Brian Griese. Come on, seriously?
Get yourself a paper bag. It'll be okay.
Okay. Paper bag to breathe in, not put on my head, right?
Correct.
Okay,
correct.
very good.
So, yes, that's important information.
Good chat, Brian. Always enjoy it. Let's do this again.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate it. Enjoy the first week of the season, pal.
Sure will. I'm loving it already. Thanks for the call. At Brian Griese on Twitter.
The Rich Eisen Show, weekdays at noon Eastern on Audience.